Can you imagine the crowd if Verstappen had have passed Hamilton on the last lap at Silverstone? So I have to say, at the very last 2 laps, I was actually sitting there going, come on, Hamilton, come on, Hamilton, come on, Hamilton. I was like, as much as I like Verstappen, I was like, I don't want him to get this win. Like, he hasn't, the same as I felt when Hamilton was winning every year. I was like, you've had enough. Sit down. Let someone else win.
Let someone else win. Yeah.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Breakingly Biased Racing Podcast. I'm your co-host, Jason Hassett, and as always, I'm joined by...
Blatantly Biased Racing Podcast.
That's what I said, didn't I?
You said breakingly biased.
I thought I said... I'm still asleep. I haven't slept in 24 hours, so...
Yeah.
Unlike you, who just, even with sleep, forgets the podcast name. So
sure,
let's not play this game.
You can keep adding on the excuses you messed up once again.
Yeah.
We'll stick to that.
Yeah. Just like McLaren this weekend. Yeah. So we've got the British Grand Prix to talk about because we've got a break now before Hungary and the rest of the season.
Yeah.
Good race. F1 is amazing still.
I mean, the rules are a failure, you know?
Yeah.
Only 6 different winner in 12 races. It's not like it happens every season, apparently.
Yeah.
Oh,
I didn't see anyone after this weekend saying the racing isn't close enough, the field is too far apart. I weirdly saw no one complaining about anything.
No sabotage.
No. Although
letters.
actually, Verstappen fans did complain quite heavily at Autosport.
For what?
I think it was Jake Boxall-Legg, if I remember correctly, at Autosport, wrote a piece saying, I think the headline was like, Verstappen should get used to being second or to coming second.
I think I came across that one.
Yeah, and it started basically saying he was handed a number 2 and stuff like this. And you can imagine...
handed? Okay.
Well, this was one of the things I said. I was like, to be honest, the article, if you read it, wasn't that bad. He had some strong opinions, but Jake Boxall-Legg is actually pretty reasonable a lot of the time. So I was like, he's probably like, let me read the actual article before judging this on the headline. Yeah. And it was just like, it was one of those typical kind of clickbait headlines. But then you read it and it was like, okay, basically he's going to have more competition. And if he wants to be first, he's going to have to work hard every weekend. It's like, and that kind of, which is like, okay, that's fair enough. The thing that I think... Yeah, the thing I think everyone got annoyed about, which is reasonable, is you really shouldn't be saying sentences like handed the win, because...
They said handed the win?
It was like handed second place. Sorry. First half. My problem with that is, it's like, imagine anyone who agrees with that, as a Hamilton fan, for example, who doesn't like Verstappen, like I could easily say, well, Lewis was handed the win by McLaren. Russell was handed the win by McLaren last weekend. There's been tons of situations over the season where people have been quote unquote handed the win. Actually, it's just not a good sentence.
Yeah, regarding Autosport, I discovered it today only. One of their chief editors or something, Alex Kalinakis, whatever his name is.
Yeah, Alex Kalinakis, yeah.
Yeah, so he'd written a piece that Max has not learned from his mistakes or something after Austria. It was utter garbage. Honestly, it was utter garbage.
Yeah.
And I didn't... Now, I reposted the whole thing on Twitter. But my main attack was on Autosport, not on him personally. A few people actually tagged him. And I said that I don't think that the person should be held responsible. It's the publication who ultimately holds it's a publisher. It's not a platform. That's a major difference between the two things.
Yes. Yeah.
Apparently he saw the whole thing and he blocked me for no reason whatsoever. And thin skin morons, to be honest.
Well, to be honest, like I say this all the time. If something really hurts you that much, it's usually because you think that it's also true and you get defensive about it. So when someone, it's like if someone says like, if you're a skinny guy and someone calls you a fat bastard, you usually laugh. You're like, yeah, okay, whatever. But if you're worried about your weight and someone calls you a fat bastard, then it hurts you because you're like, So I think it's the same with these journalists. When you say that shouldn't be written that way, that's a bad angle, and they get really defensive, it's probably because they know it's a bad angle.
The problem is, I think before we get to the race, I ideally wanted to first get to the race, then to the British
Yeah,
bias
yeah.
part.
Yeah,
But the thing is, I've seen the whole thing, and I've tried not to speak too much about it because again, they are somewhat a rival publication to Sportskeeda. But honestly, ESPN F1, Autosport, Motorsport is again Motorsport and Autosport. They kind of do the same thing. They are Motorsport has taken over Autosport. They have a deal, something like
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
And Sky Sports. I mean, there's a level to which the partisanship can be accepted. This has gone way beyond it. The kind of nonsense that I saw during the whole week between Austria to Silverstone, and now since Lewis has won, again the kind of nonsense that we've seen. There's a point at which sucking up becomes irritating. That's where we are reaching right now, and we've not even seen a title battle. It was one contact, nauseating.
It's honestly, to be honest as well, both sides of it kind of bugged me as well, because it wasn't just, there isn't just British bias, there's also like, I don't know whether it's Dutch bias or like European bias as well, but you do get the two sides where it's like, okay, so the British went too hard on Max. It was like, oh, Max is a dirty driver, like he's crashing. Back to old Max, see, it was Max's fault, not Lewis's, all that kind of, narrative. But then you also had the kind of the Dutch or European supporting side who basically said he did absolutely nothing wrong. And you're like, look, there's a balance.
Nonsense as well. Yeah.
There's a balance in between. It's look, he made the mistake, he caused the crash, but it wasn't like a crazy turn in and try and take Norris off the road. It was a middle ground. So
and no, I can understand what you're saying, but I think Max even talked about it on he actually gave an interview specifically for this to Daily Mail, where he said that 80 to 85% media is British. Yeah, he said that he said that on a British publication that 80 to 85% media is British and it is biased, and he said that as it is, and he said that I am aware of it and I don't take them seriously. But the problem is, it becomes too nauseating. It became David Croft saying that stewards should actually, I think you saw the comment as well, that he said that Christian Horner, Jonathan Wheatley and Gianpiero Lambiase, they should be called to the stewards to actually talk about Max Verstappen's actions in Austria. I mean, he's lost his fucking mind.
No,
what is he even talking about?
It's just I'm sorry, like the problem with that is it's like, no, what should happen is the FIA and the drivers should sit down and make decisions on what the rules are. And if the FIA can't implement their own rules, that's not Red Bull's fault. This is the thing as well, like, and I said this, I think I said in the last podcast, if not, I know I ranted about it on Twitter, but if people are getting annoyed about Max moving in the brake zone or whatever, which I was like, he shouldn't be doing that. Like,
yeah.
But my thinking was, first of all, it wasn't overly aggressive. But second of all, of course he's going to keep doing it, because as long as he can do it without getting penalized to the point where he loses races, he's going to keep doing it. Like, all of it's not just Max either. Like Lewis Verstappen, people will be annoyed about that. Sorry, again, no sleep. Lewis Hamilton, Sebastian Vettel, Michael Schumacher, all of them have taken advantage. If they think they can get away with it, with breaking a rule or being in the fine line of a rule.
Leclerc versus Sainz last season in Monza.
Yep.
Every rule was out of the window because they were basically cutting corners, doing everything possible.
The thing is, they know as well that if you break a rule against, or you push the rules against a teammate, it's generally let go.
Yeah.
So they're happy to race a teammate more. So all of this is the FIA's fault. Like if people want Max to not be able to kind of move twice in the brake zone, then they should hound the FIA to make sure that they give you a black and white flag the first time. They tell you it's a 10-second penalty the second time. The third time it's a drive-through. It's the same with Kevin Magnussen in Miami and Jeddah. Like, people complained about Kevin Magnussen being overly aggressive. That's not K-Mag's fault. That's the FIA's fault. Why wasn't he penalised? Yeah. If he's not getting a penalty, then as far as he's concerned, I did nothing wrong. Simple as.
Precisely.
So, it's the FIA.
And I completely understand that. And look, FIA is an incompetent organization. I know that, and it will not change. It's basically... And just wait for 2025 when we actually have a title battle, and just look at the kind of shit show that we're going to see. It's going to be
Yeah.
2021 all over again, because one race, an incident will be penalized. Another race, the driver will get will basically be allowed to do the same thing.
Yep,
And that's the
yep.
shit show we're going to see again, because we don't have full-time stewards. Very basic
Yeah.
thing.
Yep.
It's
They need to have AI full-time stewards as well. Look at track limits in Austria. They put a little bit of gravel in and they put AI to catch every single moment so that
Yeah.
it wasn't one person reviewing it all the time. So they can clearly put systems in where it's like, right, here's an AI system that simply, or, machine learning. I know people get annoyed with the idea of AI, but anyway, the idea is just, put something in.
It's not even AI. It's simply, you just
It's
put
just
the sensors in there.
machine
Very
learning
simple.
but machine learning to go right. For example, the incident where Norris kind of made the apex, took the corner, Verstappen went off track and stayed ahead. Since 2021, we've kind of agreed you can't do that anymore. Max should have given the position back.
Yeah.
You just have an AI system that tells the stewards, if they're full-time stewards, it says, in the past 5 times this has happened, this has been the penalty. So the penalty stays consistent, instead of them
put this
having
thing
to
in
go,
the rules.
what's the regulations,
It's not even, you don't have to go scroll through the rule book. You need to know these things. If fans know these things, how the fuck are stewards not knowing these things? It comes down to that.
I think the problem is they got away with having volunteer stewards for so long because of Charlie Whiting was there. And Charlie Whiting kind of knew exactly what was happening and could pass the right information and say, look, this is what we normally do. And since he left, it's been very inconsistent all the time,
Okay, be honest. Do you think Charlie Whiting was this brilliant, or after his death, it's become a bit of a thing that we tend to glorify the people that have passed?
I think there's part of that. I definitely think there's part of that. And also,
2016 Mexican Grand Prix.
Yeah.
When Vettel lost his mind, and that was utter nonsense, whatever happened that day. And that was Charlie Whiting, and he abused the heck out of him. And
he got quite annoyed on the radio at the end as well. Yeah.
If he saw Charlie just after the race, he would have smashed his head, because was how angry he was.
Charlie's human as well, so he's going to make mistakes. And I think I think what this is this has uncovered, I think he patched over a lot of those issues, if that makes sense. So obviously he wasn't going to get it right every time, but I think a lot of the time we didn't see the faults in the system because Charlie kind of knew what to do. And as soon as he was
right.
Yeah, the drivers and teams listened to Charlie. So when Charlie said, give that position back or it's going to the stewards, they were like, okay, well, we'll just give it back, because otherwise he's going to tell the stewards to penalise us.
Yeah.
So yeah, but anyway,
the whole thing went from the British bias media to the FIAs. Did you catch the clip of Tom Clarkson? I think his name is.
The guy who does the press conferences.
Yeah.
Yes.
He asked him once. He asked Lewis once, "What's your view on the incident?" Lewis declined. He asked him again and then again.
Yeah.
How desperate is Formula One media to find a bite from Lewis Hamilton about something that he's not even a part of? That's what pissed me off, because they were hungry for sound bites.
Well,
trying to manufacture controversies where...
Does that not concern you then, that perhaps this is kind of a situation where, we'll get onto the British Grand Prix in a second, but in 2021, one of the things they started saying, and in 2022, they actually put together a full a group of people to do it, to simplify the sporting regulations and make them easier to understand and easier to process, right? Yeah. And they did that, and then they did some of it, and they got the drivers involved, but they didn't go ahead and fully kind of redo the sporting regulations, which was the original plan, because the sporting regulations have kind of just been added to over 50, 60 years. They haven't, so the plan was to write them from the ground up again, having in mind modern F1, everything. I wonder if the reason that's gone away, and the reason we're getting these mistakes in the FIA not penalising, is it's good for business. Because if there's these controversies, then for Liberty Media, of course, they're like, no, we don't need to fix that, because now the Austrian Grand Prix is over, but for the entire week afterwards, everyone's talking about it. So that's great for us.
But do you think the sport can actually afford another Abu Dhabi 2021?
I think they want another Abu Dhabi 2021. Like,
I think
I
they
mean,
don't. I think they don't. I mean,
I don't know.
the problem is, Liberty Media, again, it has its affiliations with the Democrats. I think, I might be wrong. I think they have their affiliations with them.
Well, it's a left-leaning it's a media company over there that's left-leaning, I think.
It's
so.
going to be left-leaning anyways. So
Yeah.
the
New
problem
York
with that
based,
is you don't want a Lewis Hamilton to be screwed again, because I think that kind of fucks them over in a manner that they don't want it to happen. The kind of backlash that they received was bad. And again, it generates eyeballs, interest, and everything. But honestly, if the 2021 season had ended properly, it might have been a better way to go about things.
Well, if 2021 had ended properly, Lewis Hamilton wouldn't be on the grid because he would have retired after getting the
That's
eighth.
true.
On top of that, there wouldn't have been all these angry people basically just firing everyone up all day saying, I'm never fucking watching F1 again. And all of us were like, cool, goodbye. And making us want to watch F1 more. It got more people to be happy. Like, I wouldn't have been that overjoyed with Max like dominating a season, but I think there was part of it where you were like, this is kind of cool now. This is making it more interesting because it's pissing off these fans and it's making F1 Twitter more interesting. It's making, the conversation more interesting. I don't know, like,
but you don't manufacture that, right?
well, you don't. It's not that it's manufactured. It's just the cynical part of me would go like, if I was the head of the company and someone said, "Listen, we need to fix this. This is looking like corruption," and I'm going, "Is it corruption though?" They're like, "No, it was just a mistake." It's like
It's incompetency, basically.
It's incompetence, and I'm like, right. Well, because of that incompetence, we have gained something like $3 billion in the last year, and F1 is up. You have a fiduciary responsibility not to fix it, like.
That's true.
Because if you fix it,
as a businessman, that works.
So I don't know. I'm kind of getting to the point where I'm like, these are really easy issues for the FIA to fix. Like the Kevin Magnussen thing, the thing at Austria, they could easily just sit down with the drivers, put a rule in to go, right, if you move once in the brake zone, you get this. Kevin Magnussen, if you go off track, it's increasing penalties. Like everyone knows how to fix this in 2 seconds, and the FIA can't. That tells me they don't want to. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's basically us wearing a tinfoil hat. But again, calling FIA an incompetent organization is not a stretch.
This is my point. I think you're right. I think it's incompetence, but I think that also Liberty Media is not going to put any pressure to fix it because they're like, it drags up ratings. So,
maybe.
And if the FIA don't get hounded by the FOM, and then why are they going to push to fix things? Like,
I agree. And I agree with you on that. And again, just to close the topic of British, actually, I wanted to talk about this in the end, but again, that's how unprepared and unprofessional we are.
I think this podcast works. It's better if we just talk about what we find interesting, because then we tend to talk about what annoys everyone else as well. It's fine.
It was during the past week where Damon Hill actually talked about it. He hinted towards it that I'm favoring Lando Norris because I think he's right. It's not because I'm partisan towards him. I don't have any British bias. He specifically mentioned that. David Croft mentioned it in the commentary where he said that, I think, pardon the partisanship or something, but this is blah, blah, blah. Again, he went to wax lyricals about Lewis winning. I think there was one more person who talked about the same thing. And then Max has also talked about it. Do you think the British media is starting to face, at least on a certain level, they're starting to face the heat of too much partisanship now? Will they take action against it, or will they be a bit like that? Look, at the end of the day, Sky Sports' core business, core money, every penny that they get, most of it at least, it comes from the British
companies.
It's not going to come from anywhere else. So it makes sense for them
if you're watching F1 abroad, you're not like, if you're watching F1 abroad, you've got F1 TV. So you're not watching Sky Sports.
You don't. In a lot of countries, still, even for us, until 2021, until 2022, we had only Sky Sports feed. That was the only one that we had.
But I mean now, like it's
still not there in a lot of them.
I don't know. Like, I just think if you're watching F1 TV, if you're watching F1 in English outside of the UK, it's usually F1 TV, or obviously in the States. In the States, you've got ESPN and Fox who cover it. So
ESPN is basically taking the Sky Sports feed as well.
right, so there's that. Yeah, F1 TV is the Sky Sports feed also. So like it has its own live.
It
but
has
the
both of
international,
them, yeah.
yeah.
It has both of them.
I like Crofty and Brundle, so I kind of stick to the Sky Sports
Yeah.
one. You know,
Even plus it's a bit more insightful. I mean, I miss not I actually miss Nico Rosberg not being there. He only had one appearance and he killed it. I would have loved seen him again. But anyways, that's
I also
different.
like it. One thing I do miss is when some weekends Brundle's not there alongside Crofty. He's just like down at the track and not kind of talking alongside. A lot more now than he used to be. And like I have to say, Martin Brundle's one of my favorite ones of those because he genuinely he never really comes across as biased. Like, you know, I know a lot of people will say if he says anything about Max, you're like, oh, it's British bias. But I'm like, usually he's backing Max.
I would say he is. I would say
I
he
don't
is
know.
biased.
Maybe a little bit, but he doesn't come across that way.
He
I don't
has
think.
to. The problem is he has to. If your employer tells you you have to stick to the line, you have to stick to the line. And Brundle has been. Look, Brundle was basically blacklisted by Michael Schumacher in 2000s because of the whole thing, and he has towed the line because now Brundle sees himself as a senior citizen of the whole grid. He tries to treat them that way. But when it comes to a British driver against anyone else, he will take the side of the British driver some way or the other. That's still there. But again,
I don't know.
I don't mind Brundle that much, honestly.
Yeah.
He's not egregious on these aspects, but what I hear from Ted Kravitz, I mean, he's out of control.
Oh, Ted Kravitz is ridiculous. Yeah, he's always been ridiculous. Yeah.
David Croft, he crossed the line with that nonsense about asking the Red Bull senior team to be sent to the stewards to actually have a talk about Max Verstappen's actions. I mean, that's crossing the line because I've not seen one driver out of the 20, even not Lando Norris, say that there was anything wrong that Max Verstappen did that day. Not even a single driver. And you have almost every British pundit losing their mind over it. So it just shows the kind of gap there is between the two sides.
Again, that incident was simply just... I think it was Max's fault. I think, like... The thing was, I think most drivers did agree with the penalty, but they said it wasn't... It wasn't like an egregious, aggressive move, basically. And that was the fine line for me. It's like, yes, it was Max's fault, the collision, but it wasn't like he was... I don't think he was intending to bash into him. He just... He made an aggressive move.
I think there's one thing Max knows, which maybe not many people have actually caught on to, even though Mercedes has a certain resurgence. In 2021, when Max started fighting Lewis Hamilton for the title, he had a certain aura, certain confidence behind him. The reason behind it was, before 2021, he had beaten Lewis Hamilton in a straight battle multiple times. Not once, multiple times over the years. When was he not able to beat Lewis? When he didn't have the car under him.
Yeah.
In 2021, he had the car under him and he knew he could beat him. He does not want to give Lando that confidence.
Yeah.
Lando has still not beaten him for a race win when the car is there. And he does not want to give him that confidence. And that was something that was playing in his mind in Austria. I don't know if there has been a change after that, because I think he said that he valued his friendship a lot more than anything else. So maybe there was an element of that.
The problem is, once they put the helmet on and start pushing the accelerator down, I think the thing is, I think like 90% of your driving in the car is just an instinct. So, you know, it's like, I don't think they can help that. It's
going to happen again.
I think that's just that's how Max has learned to drive over his whole career. So it's not going to change. But I love it. I think it's very like Senna-esque. It's like, look, I'm going to put you under pressure and it's up to you how you deal with that pressure, not me.
Yeah.
You know, I
would say there's more of an element of a Prost or a Schumacher where he's picking his opponent and he's playing the mind game with them.
There is part of that as well, whereas Senna was very much across the board. Yeah. Everybody,
he
doesn't
didn't care.
matter.
Everyone. And in this case, there's an element of he knows he's picking his drivers. He knows he can beat Lewis. He's done that. he does not want to give Lando that confidence, and that is, again, I mean, we don't know what happens in the future, but it does appear that in 2025,
with Leclerc, he sees a Ferrari pass and he goes, they'll fall apart mid-season.
Yeah.
I'll just chill out.
yeah, I mean, everyone has done that since 2008. They know that it's going to.
Lewis
inevitable.
even, he's like, Vettel, enjoy the first half of the season. Your team will throw it away in the second half.
Precisely.
Don't worry about it.
And they do that every fucking time. Anyways,
Which they have right now.
again,
Yes.
we've
Let's get to the
waffled a
British
lot.
Grand Prix.
Now let's get
Yeah.
to the British Grand Prix, and
Yeah.
well, Lewis Hamilton wins the British Grand Prix in a race.
Amazing. Yeah.
Stunning drive. I think it was Sai, one of our viewers. He actually asked when the pod will be released, and I said it's going to be a Lewis Wankfest, and we're 25 minutes into it, and we've not even talked about it.
No.
So, I don't think he'll be disappointed, but pleasantly surprised maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So British Grand Prix, well, it started dry. It had a few sprinkles, which pretty much put, I think, 4 drivers completely out of sync with everyone. It was Leclerc,
so bad.
Alpine, I think it was Ocon, Perez, and Zhou Guanyu. So these 4 drivers, they pitted, and it was gone. They were basically out of contention. From that point onwards, rain intensified. We had Lando and Oscar 1-2, and from that point onwards, I felt that Lando is probably going to win. Then we had the first round of pit stops. Oscar was screwed over because he was pretty much, he was told to stay out for one more lap. That screwed his race. Then we had the second round of pit stops, which was basically a move from intermediate tires to slicks. Now Mercedes only had a soft, the red wall soft tires available to them.
I think they had one hard as well, right?
One
they
hard
weren't
as
sure
well.
about it.
Yeah, one hard as well, but they weren't really sure about if they could heat it up as conveniently.
Yeah.
Red Bull went with the hard wall tires, and McLaren actually had the luxury of a soft tire and a medium tire.
Yep.
Medium tire was the best tire.
They knew
in
the
that
medium
particular
tire was the best.
circumstances.
Yeah.
Oscar Piastri had already pitted and was doing purples, and they went with the red wall soft tire.
Yeah.
Again, it helped Lewis. Lewis went on to win. Max finished second. Lando was third. Lewis winning his first race after 945 days.
Crazy.
Stunning. Crazy number.
Imagine being told that in 2021. Like, Lewis will not win another race until the midpoint of 2024.
Yeah.
Like, insane.
Imagine being told that Lewis will win a race this season just 4 races back.
Yeah.
I mean, that's F1 for you.
I think that the thing is, though, like, before I take the Jake Boxall leg thing and tell everyone how I think this race win was handed to Lewis Hamilton, I do want to say, like, I actually hate that phrase. Lewis did everything he needed to do to win this race, and he won against, like, realistically 2 faster cars because the other 2 teams kind of threw their weekends away. Not one more so than the other. Like, Red Bull and Max did throw their weekend away, but it was a simpler mistake in qualifying that you can kind of go back to that kind of ruined the weekend for them. But still, that's on them, you know. McLaren, as we'll get to, I'm sure, really threw their weekend away. And Ferrari were never really in contention. Ferrari still has some stuff to do. And that's an interesting one to talk about because obviously Lewis must be looking at that going now, oh God, what have I done? But yeah, so look, Lewis, I think in qualifying, he seems to be getting closer and closer to Russell. I think he's getting more and more confident with the car. Russell still has the edge in qualifying. I think Russell is a little bit faster over one lap, still 100%. But the amazing thing for Lewis is Lewis has been brilliant in the races the whole season. Like, when it comes to the race, he has been spectacular. And we can't really bash him too much there because he has done everything. And I think it's down to he hasn't been very comfortable with the car all season, which means that over one lap, it's much harder to extract performance. But once you kind of get bedded in and you've done a few laps in the race, you can easily kind of get over that confidence issue. And that's what it looked like to me all season so far. So Hamilton being there was amazing. He did everything he needed to do. He dispatched a Russell at some point. Obviously, Russell very quickly after had the issues, so maybe that's why Russell wasn't able to pull away or to keep any distance. And yeah, like I mean, he kept the McLaren back for a while as well, which probably helped. At one point, in the first stint, right? It took Norris quite a while to get past before they got into the rain part.
Yeah, yeah. Again, I'll get to that first.
Yeah.
What happened was, after the first few laps, we had George, Lewis, Max, and Lando. So Max was struggling to keep up with them. There was around 3.5
Sorry, I
second gap.
forgot. Yeah. Max did get past
Yeah.
Norris right at the start. Yeah.
Yeah. The
Yeah, I
problem
forgot
was
about
when Lando started surging was when there were drops of rain. So
Mm-hmm.
McLaren was, I think McLaren was probably better in when it came to wet conditions. As soon as that happened, Lando got past Max. Oscar also got past Max, and both of them then jumped the two Mercedes as well.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it happened. So
I think as well, that just reminded me of one thing. Sorry, I had to cut across you. Just
Sorry,
one
go
thing
ahead.
that reminded me of is that's another thing that I think with the rain coming in, even if Russell had stayed in, I think Lewis probably would have had the edge over Russell anyway, because going into the race, Lewis had specifically talked about, and Mercedes had talked about, how they set up Lewis's car with a higher downforce because he was expecting, like he kind of thought there'd be rain and he wanted to kind of push into that. So I think as soon as that wet period came in, Lewis probably would have had the car speed on Russell as well.
Yeah.
And that's probably what helped him with the soft tires at the end as well, now that I think about it. Probably helped him not slide around as much on a very green track.
I-
Maybe.
Yeah, I have somewhat different opinion of you from you in terms of who was the faster car, because I think Mercedes was probably the fastest car. Again,
Okay.
I think so, because
Okay.
again they secured pole position. The front row was theirs.
Yeah.
For the first stint, both George and Lewis, they kind of kept Red Bull and McLaren behind. It wasn't really much of an issue. They had a 3.5 second gap, something like that. The problem where I think things changed was when it started raining. And I don't think it was really a case of Mercedes falling off or being a slower car. It was just a case of them being the leaders. And when you are a leader, I think it happened to George as well, because he was the first guy to who was actually going through the conditions, and Lewis could tail him quite
Yeah,
easily.
of course. Yeah.
And
you
and
could
it
see the
helped
line
Lewis
better.
precisely, and it helped Lewis to jump George. Similarly, it helped Lando and Oscar to kind of make their way through. Once they were through, you could see that the performance gaps, there wasn't much between
Yeah.
both McLaren and Mercedes. It was there and thereabouts. Red Bull was struggling. I feel Red Bull overachieved this weekend. Somehow, somewhere, I don't know what happened with them, that Max kind of did not have much of a performance advantage in any which way. It was while he had the intermediates on, he had no pace. He was around a second and a half slower, which was shocking to
another
see.
situation where I think they're just in such a tight performance window now that
Possibly,
it's so
yeah.
easy for them to drop out.
Yeah, it could be. I think it could be. That could be something that played a role. What helped Red Bull entirely, I think, Daniel Villante, the Canadian guy, he had something on Twitter where he showed that through strategy, Max and Red Bull gained around 9 seconds, where they kind of timed their pit stops perfectly. When it came to the switch to intermediates, it was Max's call, and he was the first to do that. It helped
Yeah.
him jump both Russell and Oscar, and then he kind of kept that position. I think overall, what we can see right now is, first of all, I have reached a point where picking the fastest car out of these three, it's stupid, because they're a tenth apart right now. What the situation that we are in is, it's going to come down to very thin margins. Anyone that nails it is going to win, and the difference could be by the team or could be by the driver.
I
We have
disagree
to start
slightly, but
accepting
anyway.
that. Yeah, go ahead. I mean, I said my piece.
No, okay. No, I disagree slightly that I think that genuinely at the moment, the Red Bull and McLaren are going to be, on average, over all of the tracks this year, the fastest. But I think that we're going to see Ferrari and Mercedes hopping in and out of contention. I'm a little bit concerned about Mercedes, right? The reason I say that is Ferrari, obviously, amazing at
Screwing up.
Yes, but amazing at Monaco and so on, and some tracks before, right?
Yeah.
Mercedes obviously at that point still hadn't brought the upgrade, or that was when they brought the upgrade. I think the new front wing
The
and
wings.
so on.
Yeah.
That was at Monaco, I think, wasn't
Yeah.
it? So
Yeah.
yeah, and the thing is, ever since then, Mercedes has been quite good, right? But the thing is, Ferrari should have been very good at Canada, but they screwed that up. That was just a complete shit fest by Ferrari, right?
Yeah.
I then think that when it comes to Spain, Austria, and Britain, Ferrari were never going to be good. It seems to me like Ferrari's quite good in low to mid speed, and they haven't got on top of the high speed corners yet, right? Whereas Mercedes are on the other side. They weren't very good in Monaco. They were quite good in Canada, I think, but I think again Canada was one of those weekends where it was all down to track conditions, the drivers getting the tires right, and I think that it was the tires more that helped them. So I think then at Spain, Austria, and Britain, they've been really, really good. But I am expecting personally Ferrari to be back up there in Austria because of the track conditions, Mercedes to maybe be there or thereabouts just for one reason, which is in Hungary, the driver can make a difference in qualifying, and Hamilton loves Hungary, so
Yeah.
I think for that reason he could still be there. But I don't think the car will be the fastest. And then I think we get to Belgium and those tracks, and all of a sudden you're going to see, oh,
Red Bull.
what happened to Mercedes? And it's going to be Red Bull versus McLaren at basically every track until we go to, say, Mexico and Coda again. And the reason is it just feels to me exactly like 2022 and 2023. Everyone's like, it's not a false dawn. Look, they're back. They've done it now at 2 or 3 races. Everything's great. You're like, yes. But once again, what's happened is both teams have made cars that are very, very good at specific tracks. And the only two cars that are very, very good at all tracks is Red Bull and McLaren. Because McLaren last year, remember McLaren did really, really well and then kind of dropped off a bit for a while. McLaren said last year, we need to make a car that is more comfortable to drive across a range of tracks. They said that was going to take time. And now they've come with the upgrade, and all of a sudden, every week they're there. And I don't think the other two teams have done that yet. So I think everyone's going to get really excited, and then we're going to go to Spa, and Red Bull and McLaren are going to be 40 seconds up the road. Or not, it's not going to be that much, but they're going to be up the road on Mercedes and Ferrari, and everyone's going to be wondering why this has happened again, personally.
Yeah. I had similar views until Austria.
Okay.
But apparently Mercedes, I don't think Mercedes brought anything to Silverstone. McLaren brought a few things. Red Bull brought a revised floor. But there was one thing that was quite evident when you look at the sector times of all these. The first and the third sector is where Mercedes made the time. And now these sectors are basically the slow speed sections, where you have the first sector, which is entirely slow speed, where you're basically depending on traction.
Is that where
First
Mercedes
sector.
made all the? Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
In the first and the third sector. The second sector, which was the fast speed section, was where McLaren was the quickest. And Red Bull was leaking time all over the place. But again, it's hard to pin where Max was specifically losing time because the floor was damaged at the point.
Yeah.
So it's hard to really point a finger at where the car actually was suffering.
Yeah.
That the whole you can say where a team has an advantage. It kind of shows that Mercedes has found something. Again, we can't really be entirely sure because from track to track the challenges are different. When it comes to Ferrari, I'm not sure where it's going to be because the way the team conducted the entire session, the FP1, FP2, FP3, just showed that they have no clue what's going on. The Spanish GP upgrades was the one where everything went off rails, and they ran 2 different cars, one for Carlos, one for Charles. In the end, both of them were put in a similar older spec, and Charles was blindsided.
Ferrari
but again, that's
being
a different.
Ferrari. Yeah.
Precisely. It was basically 2018 once again. The problem is, in all of this, I don't think Ferrari is in a position to capitalize. What we might see in Hungary is maybe again McLaren, Red Bull, and Mercedes being at the front. Ferrari being a bit behind. That's where I kind of stand at this stage. Because I've not seen Mercedes struggle in terms of pace even in Canada when it was dry, because Russell had the pace to keep up. And even in Silverstone, I didn't really see a point where Mercedes had a peaky performance and then it dropped off. Nothing like that. It was stable. It was, and you see the confidence in the way Toto Wolff has been talking about, and even George, he has been quite confident, and he said that we're going to win more races this season.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where they kind of stand.
The only thing is, it was the same in 2022 and 2023. The only thing that's making me confident at all is that with James Allison, he seems to be kind of taking a more measured approach to everything. Yeah. And maybe this time around, it isn't like a false dawn again. But it's just, it's strange to me that the race who have like Gary Anderson, everyone are like this. I think we can say now after these few tracks that this definitely isn't a false dawn. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm going to hold off a couple more races because we were saying the same thing. Like, I think around the same time, Hungary last year, was it, when Hamilton got pole? You know, like there was, 2022 in Spain, or 2022 in Spain, the Mercedes were right up there. In Great Britain, they were right up there again. You know, like, but we've had this a few times.
They weren't the fastest car, right? I mean, even they were never in this situation throughout the ground effect era. They've never been in this situation. In the last
Brazil.
4 races, they've won. They've got 2 pole positions and 2 wins. They haven't had this kind of run ever throughout this era.
No, and that's where I'm saying maybe I'm wrong because James Allison. I did say on the last podcast with Ahmed, like I do agree that James Allison for me is the only thing that makes me think maybe this is different. I'm just a little bit concerned about.
All I need to do is just go back a few pods and just there's this one man sitting in Mexico and who was pretty much shitting on James Allison, calling him a fraud.
Yeah.
Look how the tables turn, isn't it?
I was joking, so it's fine.
I know. I mean, again, it's good to see him actually get his worth, honestly, because after Newey, I rate him very highly, and again, he's shown it plenty of times.
Speaking of Newey going to Williams, by the way.
No, he's going to Aston Martin.
Did you not hear?
Yeah. Oxfordshire is apparently close to all these locations.
It's the thing is, Oxfordshire is close to Northamptonshire and Buckinghamshire, which is where Silverstone of Aston is in Northamptonshire, I think, or Northamptonshire, and Milton Keynes is in Buckinghamshire. But Grove is actually in Oxfordshire itself.
Okay.
And that's why Jeremy Clarkson was like, "Can I give you an exclusive?" Jeremy Clarkson was likely just trying to wind the press.
He was buzzed.
Yeah. The only thing that makes me think that he might not have been winding people up is, as you said, he seemed quite drunk. Yeah. So maybe he was like, Newey's told me, because they are friends, the two of them as well.
They were classmates apparently.
Yeah. They went to the same school. Like that, So maybe Newey's like, I'm going to Williams, but don't tell anyone. And he was like, he told me I couldn't say he was going to Williams, but he didn't say, about the house.
I'm looking for places in Oxfordshire.
Yeah.
But
we'll see.
Anyway, that's for different case.
Podcast.
Again, I'm actually coming back to Lewis and the whole thing around him.
Great race.
Why are you surprised?
You know what? I was surprised just because I think one, he was behind Russell in qualifying, and I think I've kind of been of the opinion where, unfortunately for Hamilton, it makes it so much harder for him to win. But once Russell got out of the way, I wasn't as surprised because I was like, right, he has been really good in the races, and I think it was just a case of the only thing that surprises me is I wasn't expecting the luck to go his way because, let's be honest, it hasn't for like 2-3 years now, not properly. So I was expecting McLaren to take that win because realistically it was McLaren's win to lose. Absolutely.
Yeah, completely. There's no doubt about it.
And then at the end when Max started pushing and he got past Norris, that was a part of me where I was like, oh God, like...
No, there were 2 laps left, right? There were 3 laps left. And
it wasn't enough, but there was part of me that just thought, if the tire wear on the Mercedes has been pretty terrible at points this season.
Yeah,
I was like, it's a green track. The tire wear has been bad. There are still some damp patches. All it takes is for Lewis, just because he hasn't won in a couple of years. Obviously, he's going to be fucking dying to get it. And even an experienced driver like him, he could easily have just touched the curb slightly, gone a little bit, and that 2 seconds is gone. Can you imagine the crowd if Verstappen had have passed Hamilton on the last lap at Silverstone? So I have to say, at the very last 2 laps, I was actually sitting there going, come on, Hamilton, come on, Hamilton, come on, Hamilton. I was like, as much as I like Verstappen, I was like, I don't want him to get this win. Like, he hasn't, the same as I felt when Hamilton was winning every year. I was like, you've had enough. Sit down. Let someone else win.
Let someone else win. Yeah. So, for me, the biggest takeaway from the whole thing was that, again, fortunately, apparently he has a 3-year contract with Ferrari.
2+1, I think it is. But anyway.
Yeah, something like that. Fred Visser talked about it today only.
Yeah.
But
I'm guessing it's a 2+1 on both sides, I would imagine.
I guess so. I think
I doubt it would just be on Lewis's side, the
100%. 100%. But again, we'll get to Ferrari later. One thing that I've actually, the whole, the way the whole thing was celebrated and the way the crowd kind of, you could see there were a few fans who were a bit like, well, he's done it. There was a certain sense of appreciation of the kind of greatness that actually is Lewis Hamilton, to be honest.
I kind of think it's a shame he's not retiring at the end of the year, because I think this could be the way to go out on a big high.
I don't think he was
Ferrari's
going to
be good.
Yeah, we'll get to that. I think the problem is, if he wanted to get leave at the end of the season, he would have done it at the end of 2021 as well. He's staying in the sport for that 8th title, and maybe at least for once fight for it. Win or lose is something else, but at least he wants to fight for it.
Yeah, which is fair. Yeah,
completely understandable. The thing is, there will be a day when Lewis leaves the sport, and I think the kind of vacuum that he's going to leave behind, it's going to be massive. This kind of fan base, the kind of celebrities that actually, congratulated him, reached out to him, the kind of drama, the spectacle, I don't think we'll have that level of theater in Formula One once he's gone. Maybe someone else will rise up. Maybe if Kimi Antonelli is this big of a talent, which again he won a Formula 2 race this past weekend. Unless he is a big talent, I don't think I've seen him being a big talker. I have not seen the kind of charisma that I saw with Max, and who's basically commanding a huge army behind him. But he's Italian. If Kimi Antonelli is that thing, Italians love their own more than anyone else. And if he does prove to be something, then maybe we have a big star. But unless that is the case,
if he gets into Mercedes, need to be careful with him, because if he gets into there and does really, really well, Ferrari will look to poach him as the Lewis Hamilton replacement in a couple of years. Because why wouldn't they? Depending on how good he does, obviously, but they will
and
throw
how good
money
Ferrari
at it.
does. And how good Ferrari
Of course,
does.
there is that as well. Yeah, there is that as well.
you can't discount that factor.
But yeah, I think your point on Lewis leaving a vacuum, I think that's a fair point, just because I think for a lot of F1 fans it won't, because most of us, watch because it's F1, not because of a driver.
Honestly, we are 10 to 15% of the whole brigade right now.
Yeah, but that's what I was going to say.
Honest.
But I do think there's a little bit of an overblownness in it, because one thing is, with the American audience and the celebrities, I don't know if it will, because Americans just like winners. So, this is why most Americans don't go and support Logan Sargent. They support Max Verstappen or Lewis Hamilton, because they want to support winners.
You've seen that clip of the hug to a girl.
Yeah.
Apparently, she was asked about Max Verstappen. I mean, not to get into details, but again, that was actually funny that even she's being questioned. And
she said she
knew
would
who
with
Max
Max,
Verstappen
but
was.
she wouldn't with Donald Trump. Yeah, the thing. This is my point, though. Americans like winners. They don't, So the thing is, as much as they all love Lewis, I think a lot of the American fans will just like Max because they like to support the winner.
Yeah.
Whereas I think a lot of us post-colonial people prefer to support the underdog. Like, as soon as a driver, I was supportive of Max up until I think 2021 and after, or 2022 maybe, and then after that it's kind of like, cool, I want to see someone else win now. I like to see the underdog.
Same here.
Yeah. I think he'll leave a vacuum for a couple of reasons. One is he's kind of been pushing himself as a celebrity in other fields, outside of it. But
He has
the
34
thing is,
million. He has 34 million Instagram followers right now. I
yeah,
think
but
even
how
the
many
F1
does Daniel
official account
Ricciardo
is
have?
8 or 9.
I don't know. It's surely it's more, right?
No,
No?
that's it.
Okay.
I think
But
the
yeah,
second highest is Charles Leclerc.
where it'll leave an audience as well is like, not to bring race into it, but obviously he has been a huge push
That's the
for
big thing.
black drivers.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it'll leave a vacuum there.
I think the sport was very
definitely.
lucky that in 2006 Michael Schumacher left and in 2007 Lewis came into the picture. Maybe we'll be lucky again because
Yeah.
everyone felt that when Michael leaves, look, Michael brought a lot of fans, and he brought a lot of fans simply by being. I mean, for an Indian, Michael Schumacher he was known and he was friendly with Sachin Tendulkar, which is one of India's biggest cricket stars. So through that, we got to know of a Michael Schumacher or a Ferrari or a red Ferrari. That's how the whole
Yeah.
thing began.
Yeah.
It's again Lewis.
But is that not my point
Yeah.
though? Like, how many Schumacher fans do you know that are still watching? Because I know tons.
Plenty. Plenty.
Like Vettel fans. There's people like of the older group. There's a ton of people who watched for Damon Hill and for Senna who are still watching today. So I think in the short term, sure, but the thing is, like, Drive to Survive is not going away. Liberty Media is not going to just let it drop off. They're going to push it even harder.
Yeah.
Like when Lewis leaves and you get a lot of people that want to go, fine. But I also do think as well that, like, I think 70 or maybe not 70%, but I think like 50% of those fans, they'll probably keep watching. Like, because
I guess so.
I think it's like someone said it to me on Wheel Sports in the comments. They were like, we all started watching because we were interested in one driver. And then when that driver left, we just kind of became F1 fans.
Yeah.
And
That's
I think
me.
that's true. Yeah.
That's
yeah,
me
yeah.
as well. Yeah, I mean, I started in 2005 when Narain Karthikeyan actually debuted. I just wanted to see where he was. So,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's something that happens. You just want something to bring the guy to the sport. I mean, why I mentioned this was because this has happened with MotoGP. Valentino Rossi was massive.
Huge. Yeah.
Yeah, and he retired in 2020 or 2021, something like that. And even today, that's 3 years since, he has to appear on the in Mugello in the Italian Grand Prix because he brings the crowds.
Yeah.
3
yeah.
years after his retirement.
Part of that will happen, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Like, I think in the short term, sure, it'll definitely happen. But the sport has been huge before Lewis Hamilton. It'll be huge after
continue to
Lewis Hamilton.
And
the thing
3 years
it's
is a big time, honestly. Who
Yeah.
knows what's going to happen in 3 years?
Plus, let's be honest. If the people who are diehard Lewis Hamilton fans were going to leave the sport completely, they would have done it after Abu Dhabi 2021, and they haven't. They're still around. I also think a lot of those fans who are like diehard, I'm only watching because of Hamilton. I also think they're quite young, because I don't know about you. Like, I don't personally. I'm 35 now. And, people are like, oh my God, I just saw this celebrity. I'm like, I just saw some celebrity. I'm like, yeah. Like, I think as you get older,
you don't get starstruck anymore, right?
you kind of know that these celebrities and drivers are just fucking humans like the rest of us. And we admire them. We think they're great people, amazingly talented. But we're also, I'm not going to see them and be like, oh my God. Like, it's, even if I saw Vettel, I'd be like, I'd love to have a drink with him, but I'm not going to be like, oh my God, it's Vettel. Oh my God, So I think those people grow up and they'll just keep watching F1. So, and then I think, but also, do you think maybe the 17, 18-year-olds that are watching now, they'll probably start watching for Ollie Behrman, Lando Norris.
They already have. Yeah,
these young guys. They're not that interested in some 40-year-old guy, regardless of who he is. You know what I mean?
I agree.
So,
and all of them command an audience already, which is surprising.
Yeah. So,
anyways, moving on. So Lewis Hamilton,
fantastic
great
weekend
job
from Lewis.
Yeah,
fantastic. Yeah.
not the wank fest that we promised, but that's all you're going to get from us.
Yeah, but appreciative of Lewis. I think people think we hate Lewis Hamilton, and for some reason, like, everyone on F1 Twitter thinks I'm a Verstappen fan, and I'm not. Like, I'm genuinely not. Like,
yeah. I get both of them. I mean, I get shouted at by Verstappen fans. Lewis Hamilton fans hate me because apparently, if someone says Lewis Hamilton is the GOAT, I don't think he is the greatest driver of all time. And whenever I say that, they're like, you hate him, you're a racist, you're like, a fucking hell. Even I'm bored of these comments. Even I know how predictable this is.
I got all of that, and then when I went on Twitter to say that was absolutely Max's fault, it wasn't aggressive, but it was Max's fault.
Yeah.
I got a ton of people being like, "Your takes have gone to shit," and I'm like, "Do you mean my take no longer aligns with your take?"
With
Like,
your take. Yeah.
that's all it is. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that has to be. Anyways, moving on from Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes,
McLaren.
let's talk about bottle jobs. I mean,
Okay, it's so bad.
first of all, what's your take on the whole thing?
I think that there is one optimistic way to look at this and one really negative way to look at this. So let's look at the negative side first, which is McLaren have done the same thing once a fucking again since 2021, which is consistently asking their drivers to make the tire choice, which is just fucking terrible because the driver doesn't have all the data, right? So, like, if it's a fine margin, if you're like, look, we think the soft and the medium, there's going to be fuck all between them, then you say to the driver, which one would you feel more confident on? But when you know, as everyone fucking watching did, that McLaren had kept that tire to be better in the race, then why didn't McLaren say, like, they didn't need to go, which tire do you want to go on? Because the question they actually asked him, which I think was really like dumb, and Norris really kicked himself afterwards. But I was thinking to myself, of course Norris was going to give that answer, because the question they kind of phrased was, do you want to go on this to cover Max, who is at this point behind you, or do you want to go on this tire to cover Lewis? He's racing for the win. Of course he's going to say Lewis. So that phrasing was just terrible. So I don't think Norris can kick himself too much there. That is McLaren once again doing what they should have done, or doing once again what they shouldn't have done in Russia a couple of years ago when he was stuck out in the intermediate. They should have immediately said, Norris, box. Like, just come into the pits. They shouldn't have been like, how do you feel about... Because he's like, I'm trying to fucking hold the car together here. Like, just, they should have been forceful and said, come in now. And they should have done the same here. And they did the same with Oscar as well, with the intermediates. I get the gamble they were making with Oscar, but surely they should have looked at Leclerc and Perez and been like, if we leave this too late, it's going to be really bad.
They lost 20 seconds.
Yeah, Norris was basically on him by the time he came out of the pits, right?
Yeah.
So it's McLaren once again. The optimistic side I'll really quickly give, which is I do think it's probably a good idea that they're basically getting the drivers really pissed off now, because Norris looked quite annoyed afterwards as well, as he should be. I think they're having a Red Bull 2009, 2010, maybe early 2011 moment, because Red Bull now we know is like this operationally perfect team, but that came by fucking up in 2009, fucking up in 2010 a lot, to the point where they got all these issues out of the way. And I think given where Max is in the championship now, it's probably good that they make all of these mistakes now so that next year, operationally, they're perfect. That's the optimistic way of looking at it. The negative way is that these are rookie mistakes. They shouldn't be
happening.
Yeah.
And I completely agree with you. My main takeaway from the whole thing was, I think Zach Brown, Andrea Stella, and Lando Norris, they have to sit down and be very honest with them about a few things. First is, you're not fighting for the title this season, at least not the driver's title. Constructors is still on, they can win. Driver's title is gone, and you have to treat it that way. What 2024 is,
I disagree. For the exact reason you're about to say.
Okay, so for 2024, this is a dress rehearsal for 2025. And what they need to do, again, I'm going to use your word, you have to stress test everything. Every weekend you're going to be fighting against Max Verstappen, and whatever weaknesses that you are going to detect, there could not be a perfect... I mean, this does not happen every time. That you can basically run a season as... It's a test for them. You're going to get in every race and... Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just really quick. Is that not why they should treat it as a title fight? Do the opposite.
They could,
tell them
but
to treat it as a title fight.
The problem is you can set your expectations too high.
Yeah.
And the problem is, this is something that Ferrari does, and why Ferrari implodes. If they treat this season as a title fight, you're going to set your expectations too high, and you're going to beat yourself up. Lando's
Okay.
problem has been that he beats himself up whenever he does not win. I mean, even when he did not get pole position on Saturday, he was like, I'm not as good as these two British drivers. Something like that, he said. This season has to be like, find out every area where we are weak, work on it, because at least one aspect we've nailed, and that is the car, and that is the most important part. Now it's time you start fixing these things. You start working on your operational part. What works for Mercedes and for Red Bull is, in the since 2010, these are the two teams that have won, so they know how to win.
Yeah.
Mercedes has not forgotten how to win in the last 2 seasons.
We saw that this weekend, yeah.
100%. That was why they won, because as soon as everything happened, it was like clockwork. You know what you need to do. Everyone knows what he needs to do. McLaren does not have that, and it will get to that point. But they have to treat the season as such, and
This
not
is a new team as well, isn't it? This isn't the McLaren
entirely
that we...
new team. It's not the MP4 project that Ron Dennis ran.
Yeah.
Right? So you have to treat it that way. And most importantly, stop the pot shots and stop trying to have these stupid mind games with Red Bull, because you're not on their level right now. It was pretty... It seemed forced when Zach Brown started commenting on Horner's relationship with Jos Verstappen and how the team is not respecting the rules and stuff like that. You're trying to force an altercation, but there's no need for it.
Yeah.
Find areas where you're weak, get better, and that is what your focus should be this season.
Yeah.
That's entirely my whole thing, because you have the car. That's the most important thing. If you have the car, you have the driver, you'll be fighting with them every race. Next part is, don't implode like Ferrari does, and just get better.
Yeah. I think the stress is probably on the drivers, because they're used to kind of getting to a point where they have the car that could win at some weekends, and they want to take full advantage of it, which I can understand. I think that, you know, this year makes me more confident about 2025, because I don't see any weaknesses in that McLaren, and I think that these regulations are hitting the ceiling. So I don't think it's a case of over the winter break Red Bull's going to come back with another RB19. Like, it's so McLaren should be, unless they make a massive fuck up with upgrades, should come back in 2025 with a car that can be at the top of the grid.
Yeah.
You know, and then it just depends where Ferrari and Mercedes come to, whether it's a bigger fight. But yeah, I agree. And like, this should be a test. It should be a massive test.
Precisely. And again, they should... Lando beats himself up too much. I mean, that... And he should as well, because he should have won. But he should stop taking the responsibility of everything. That's where he needs to be a bit more careful, and the team also. But again, I mean, Andrea Stella is
he needs to learn from watching Carlos a bit there, where it's like, you know, Carlos, whatever we say about his pace, he has always been that one driver when they're like, come in for this or do this. If he thinks it's the wrong call, he's like, no. You know, and Lewis will do that. Max will do that. They'll be like, no, I'm not coming in. Lando, I think Lando's just been playing like the waiting game for the car too long.
He's not found the sweet spot, right? He's not found the sweet spot with his race engineer, because the kind of chemistry that Max has with GP, you don't see that.
But I think it comes to Lando. That comes from a that comes from like forming like a diamond. That comes from those years of like that, just under pressure. Lando and McLaren, they need their 2021, I think, to really push it together. And I think you're right. Like, they should just use this year, pretend this is 2021. Look, we're not going to win the title, so it doesn't really matter where we end up. But let's just every fucking weekend try and be perfect. And if we're not perfect, that's why Red Bull won in 2021 in reality, because Max basically said from the outset, and Max has kind of always raced this way. It's what's been amazing to watch about him. He treats every weekend as if it's his own championship. So he just wants to be, like, as far as he's concerned in his head, the way it seems is, if I win this race, I'm the champion. And if he just does that enough weekends in a row, he does become the fucking champion. Whereas Lewis has always looked at it over the course of a full season. You know, Max is closer to Schumacher in that way. It has to be every weekend.
But again, Lewis does that now. The initial years, even he was a bit on the same level. Again, it comes with experience. The Lewis of the 2012, 14, 15... he was very on it. He wanted to win every race. But again, with experience, he learned that you have to be more measured. Plus, he had
Yeah.
the car to kind of be more calculative in the way
It's
he
why
kind
it's
of,
so interesting when they don't have the car.
yeah, you have to
Yeah.
do it every weekend. But again, this is something that will always be there. I just feel McLaren should not be too let down. And again, just keep your eyes and ears away from the trolls. I mean, the kind of hate that McLaren and Norris has got, it's stupid in
Yeah.
my view. It's utterly rubbish that the kind of,
McLaren have done an amazing job. Lando is doing an amazing job. These are just the thing is as well, like these are just silly issues that Lando's just in a situation where, like you were just saying about Lewis, like think about this. If this was 2014, 2015, right? And Mercedes made that fuck up and switched on to softs instead of mediums, it wouldn't have mattered because the car was so far ahead, right?
Precisely.
So McLaren are just in the unfortunate situation where every small issue is going to be a huge issue on track. And as you said again, this is why this year is the perfect dress rehearsal to just get rid of all those issues, because Red Bull won't make those mistakes next year. So even if McLaren come with the fastest car and Red Bull is the second, but it's close enough that Max can fight, they're not going to make the mistakes. So it's going to come down to two things: Norris is driving on track and operations. And
anyways, I mean, I think that's about it from McLaren. Talking about Red Bull, by the way, this was the third consecutive weekend. Third consecutive weekend where I don't think Red Bull had the fastest car. And again, Max is getting the job done.
Yeah.
But the second driver, Sergio Perez, is not. I mean, again, if you are in Christian Horner's position, how do you solve the Sergio Perez problem for Red Bull right now?
He needs to be dropped, because the thing is, like, if he was, even if Sergio Perez was finishing behind Lando, right? Like, if he was finishing third or fourth, in every race, that would be absolutely fine, because he'd be there to kind of upset things with strategy. And next year, McLaren are going to have a situation, which is unfortunate for McLaren in a way as well. McLaren are going to have a situation probably where Oscar is getting better with tires. So both drivers are going to be there. I think Norris will come out the gate and it'll be a situation where 3-4 races in, they'll say, right, look, Norris is far enough ahead in the championship that, we need to back him now fully. And I think Oscar will fall into line, right? But that means Oscar will be there to kind of keep track position, keep Verstappen behind.
The problem is it's not even Oscar right now. It's there are top four teams, and
that's the other thing.
Sergio is the 8th fastest driver on a good day. It's not on a bad day. On a bad day, he DNFs or does not score any points.
He's not there to help Max next year, and that's all he was. That's all they really want him to do. He's not there to help
Max this year, and
no,
Red Bull could lose the Constructors' Championship.
Red Bull will lose the Constructors, I think. There's enough races left that if he can't get it together, we know for a fact apparently, the race commented on it, and I checked with someone at Red Bull. Apparently it's if he's 100 points behind Max after the, I think it's after, so it's after
Summer
Belgium break. I think it's July 28th. He can be dropped. So, and one of the
there are two things, by the way. There are two things. He should be less than 100 points behind Max. Second is what should we call it? The gap in positions in the championship standings. It should not be more than 5 positions. These are the two exit clauses.
Yeah. And at the moment, he's very close to being overtaken by Lewis and Russell.
Yeah,
which would put him down to what, like
P6 right now.
Yeah,
which is basically 5 positions.
So if Lewis and Russell jump up there in the next race, which they could, because it's only 6 or 7 points, that's it. He's down there. I do wonder. Someone put I can't remember who it was that I read. Someone put a skeptical point across where they were like, I wonder, were these performance clauses already there, or was this something added? Basically, we'll give you a 2-year contract, but we're adding something to the current contract.
I guess so.
Because that could be a way where they say, right, well, now we have the option after the summer break to try which I know a lot of people will think is crazy, but to try Daniel Ricciardo for 6 months, you know, um, which I think they'll do. If I'm honest with you, it wouldn't surprise me if that happened because
So what I've got
I
to know is Daniel is the front runner.
yeah,
So from
Horner doesn't seem to want to
whatever
put a
sources
rookie
are
in
saying,
there ever again. I think
and
that's the
it's
simple
smart,
fact for me.
and it's a
Yeah,
smart thing. I don't look. Gasly and Albon are handy drivers, and the way they got smashed. That
yeah.
was bad.
It
That
was a
didn't look
more
good.
difficult car, but even taking
Even
that
then,
into account,
yeah,
yeah,
it
not
didn't
great.
look good.
No.
And you don't want to put Liam in that situation and screw him over as well. Just let him grow. I mean, just give him
Yeah.
position at RB. So again, if you're leave everything aside, whatever you've heard and everything, if you had to make a call, how would you go about it? You will put Daniel Ricciardo?
If I had to make the call, I'd put Carlos Sainz in there, but I know that's not an option. So,
No, leave that aside.
yeah.
You'd be fine with putting Carlos, right?
I'd put Carlos in there. Like I said, if there was no background knowledge to why it wasn't going to happen, Sainz would be right to put in there because I think Sainz would be. I think you could get Sainz into line, and I think Max beat Sainz anyway over the course of a season. You know, so yeah. Then again, is it the right decision? Because if you're in a situation where you just need a number two, and you've got other teams, yeah, I think still Sainz because I can't see anyone else that'd be strong enough to be up there. And Sainz would they could probably put in the clause that like you have to adhere to team orders. Like, you know, if
He'll sign that contract, right?
maybe
He
not,
won't.
maybe not. But
And
then
what would be your long-term ploy overall? I mean,
I
what you're doing
genuinely,
is what you're doing right now is you're taking a look at 25, 26, 27. These are the 3 years.
yeah.
What's your entire plan for
I think
Red Bull? What's your entire plan from Red Bull, RB, and the entire chain that has been kind of broken in the last few years? How would you go about the entire thing in terms of placing the drivers in certain positions?
again, in an ideal world, I think you put Sainz in there because I think the 2026 is an unknown, and I think having Sainz in there alongside Max, I think you can get over the issues that's around that. You can figure out the team orders. Max will probably just win on track anyway, so most of that can be done. Then again, you know, he has given Leclerc a good challenge to be fair, but I think Max, it's a different situation.
Yeah.
Ideally, you put Sainz in there for a couple of years. That being said, look, that's just not going to happen. Yeah, till 2026, and at that point, you've figured out your other options, right? That's not going to happen. So let's do a realistic one. The realistic one for me is Perez basically, if he hasn't fixed everything, which I don't think he will, and to be honest with you, I think it's the same thing 3 years in a row now. I think it's just time to say this isn't working. I think you put Ricciardo in there, right, for 6 months of this year, because there is a situation where Ricciardo did do that Silverstone test, right? There's a couple of situations where we know that kind of somewhat the way Max drives, Ricciardo was obviously able to handle with as well because they've driven together before quite successfully, you know. So maybe Ricciardo gets in there, he's at a top team, the confidence comes back, and maybe Ricciardo is all of a sudden kind of boom, the old Ricciardo that we miss. He's back, not quite near Verstappen. The two of them get on. You have this kind of perfect symbiosis. And what that does is give you a driver for 2025 as well. If it doesn't work out, at least you know now whether or not it's going to work out. And you also get Lawson into the car alongside Yuki as well. Yeah, because at the end of 2025, Yuki's gone. Like, they're not keeping him. That decision's been made, I think, for a long time now. So they need to get Tsunoda in. They need to get Lawson in to test him. They'll then need to get Hadjar in. So I think, or, you know, someone along those lines. So I think the long-term strategy is you get Ricciardo in now, you make him that solid number two. They know how to manage Ricciardo. They've done it before. He'll probably be closer than Perez. I think just on the pure point that Ricciardo has been, once he gets his confidence, is always quite good in qualifying. So even if he's not smashing it in the race, he'll probably be close enough to kind of upset people behind him, which is all they need for now. And then that gives you the 25 season to decide who's going in alongside him for 2026. If everything is stable and fine and Ricciardo's doing well, you probably just keep the status quo going into a new regulation set. If it's not doing well, then you've already tested and you know whether Lawson's good enough, you know whether Hadjar's good enough, for example. You know what I mean? So you've already tested these things. At the moment, it's either they put Ricciardo up to test the rookies, or they do another Sergio Perez, which is take someone from outside of Red Bull, which can only be Sainz. Like, who else are they going to put in there that would be a definite upgrade? You know, like Perez isn't a horrible driver. It's just not. It's not working. It's clearly not working. But like, if I said to you, what other driver could you put in from another team that would take the seat right now? By the way, like, they don't want Alonso. Apparently, like he said, they turned him down, which is fine. And I get that, for probably the same reason they don't want Sainz, because it'll just upset the boat too much. Yeah. So then, outside of those two, do you bring Vettel back? That's just as risky as putting Ricciardo in the seat. As much as I love Vettel, but it's
That's
just
worse, actually. Yeah.
I love Vettel, but it could go one way or the other. So it's the same sort of risk that you have with putting Ricciardo in. Yeah. Ocon, it's never going to happen.
Never happening.
Hulkenberg would be a great shout, an amazing shout. But again, he's going to Audi. Like, is he going to take a 1 year risky chance with Red Bull? Probably, actually. Yeah. But are Red Bull going to?
I mean, he'll take it. He'll take it. And again, I mean, you know, why Red Bull finds itself in this situation is the whole fabric and the whole DNA that Red Bull had
was
it's been broken a bit, right? It's been broken because Red Bull was this ambitious, risk-taking, ruthless squad where, out of the blue, they replaced Sebastian Vettel with Daniel Kvyat in 2015, and it worked out. Daniel, I think he outscored Ricciardo in the first season in 15. Again, they removed him. They brought in Verstappen. They basically replaced a teenager with a teenager and actually got an upgrade. Again, Daniel was out. They brought in Gasly. They brought in Albon. They had trust in their own feeder system and they got things done. Now, the problem with them is, and I think to an extent, it has to do with the fact that Marco kind of chilled out after he found Verstappen. He thought that this was his legacy driver. And after that, he's picked up pretty... Honestly, whatever next he's brought in, they've been good, but they've not been excellent. Marco was also responsible for Oscar Piastri slipping away and going to Alpine, which is a big loss. Marco was also responsible for Jack Doohan, who was actually, again, another one that they missed out in the last season. So he's not really been the one that has actually helped have a decent, healthy supply of good talent come through. And right now, Isaac Hadjar, he's decent. I don't think he's even as good as Liam Lawson right now. Again, that's just my personal opinion because whatever I've seen, I don't see that.
Also, Pepe Lawson's been in an F1 car. He's been pressure tested there. So I think there's that. Yeah, that's hard. Same with Behrman. You know, it's hard to get that experience.
Lawson almost won DTM, right? Lawson in his rookie season almost won the DTM.
He's a very good driver. So
And Isaac Hadjar, I'm not too confident. Pepe Marti is good. His first season has been good. I think he's also backed by Alonso. There's some connection. There's one driver I'm very interested in, Arvid Lindblad. He's in F3 right now and he's leading the championship. So again, I was asked this question by someone on Twitter, and my view was, look, there's been a lot of nonsense that has been going on with Red Bull. A lot of it is actually the appeasement of a Verstappen family. The decision taken to actually give an extension to Sergio Perez was a part of it. So it's about time just get rid of that nonsense, because Verstappen is actually losing out because of all this. Him fending off 2 to 3 drivers of different teams is not the position he wants to be in.
No.
Not the right way to go about it. So for now, what Red Bull needs to do is they need to be ruthless. Bring out the checkbook. Sign whatever amount there needs to be signed. Bring in Nico Hülkenberg for 2025 and 2026. Give him those 2 years. And during those 2 years, either start targeting Oscar Piastri, George Russell, and maybe to an extent Lando Norris as well. Because these are 3 drivers who they have been linked to Red Bull in terms.
This is their big issue too, right? Because Verstappen's not going to be around forever too, and they also just don't have
that.
They don't have a Verstappen in the pipelines at the moment.
There's no one.
They've basically always had a Verstappen in the pipelines.
Yeah.
Whether it worked out or not.
there was a Verstappen. They don't have anyone.
But at the same time, and in between those, they like at points, they had Mark Webber, who was very, very good. He wasn't a Vettel, but he was a good, solid driver. They had a Ricciardo who didn't turn out to be quite a Verstappen, but he was a very, very good driver at the time.
Daniel Ricciardo in 14, 15, 16 in a Mercedes would have won the title.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, without a doubt.
No doubts about it. And again, he gets a lot of shit these days because he's lingered on and he's dropped off.
Yeah. The problem is that drop off, if you don't have a title, gets held against you. Like if Kimi Räikkönen, the drop off, it's like it's Kimi. Once a driver wins a title like Alonso, they kind of get a lifetime
even the new
kind of pass.
The problem is the new kids have not seen Kimi Räikkönen of the past, and that talent is. I'm telling you, the 2005 Monaco Grand Prix. I've not seen anyone that stunning in a car ever. And that includes every Vettel, Alonso, Max, Lewis, name anyone. None of them has been as
This is my point, though. It's like world champions always get a pass over everyone else. Like if you were Ferrari and you were saying we want to get someone from Mercedes, which of the two drivers has done the best job completely over the past 2 years or 3 seasons? You take George, but Hamilton is Hamilton, so obviously you take Hamilton. So this is just this thing. It's like, at the moment, I can't think of anyone who.
Arvid Lindblad is someone who might be good. Again, he's 17, and him leading Formula 3 right now is very impressive. Because at 17,
do you think the biggest mistake was that Red Bull basically, as it was before Dietrich died, but it was kind of leading up to his death, there was already kind of mumblings of like, what's this going to be after Dietrich died? Because everyone kind of knew. And one of the big mistakes I think they made was the Red Bull board and the Austrian side was already pushing to kind of make it so that there wasn't this loss leader team, because Red Bull Racing was making money, but AlphaTauri was always it just lost money because it was just there to train juniors. And as soon as they made it a sister team, that is the point I think where they've caused this issue, because if it was still the junior team, they would have at points gotten rid of Yuki. They would have Yuki wouldn't be there, unfortunately for Yuki, because they would have said not good enough, replace him. Ricciardo would not be in that seat because they'd be like, it's a junior team.
What's the point?
Nick de Vries wouldn't have got that seat there. It's a junior team. So they would have at the very least, have been testing 4 or 5 different rookies. And maybe they would have gone for Oscar Piastri in that situation, because it would have been like, right, he's a rookie, let's grab him and see where this pans out. Whereas when it becomes a sister team, it's like, no, we need to be more careful about who we put in there.
It's become a bit, and that's why I said they have to be aggressive now, because look, you cannot bank your future with Max Verstappen there, because the rumblings and the desperation of Jos Verstappen, where he does not want his kid to be in Red Bull. He's made it very clear.
Yeah.
And that's what they have to do for now. I'd say just go out there, give him a blank check to Nico Hülkenberg, get him on board at least for 2025 and 2026. Give him those 2 years. He's someone who, again, he's good in qualifying, so he will not be that far behind. Secondly, I do think that I think apparently Max and Nico are quite close in terms of they are quite friendly. So if there is a need of maybe you can say team order or something,
if there's
Nico
team
will
orders,
be fine in doing that.
Listen, Hulk getting in a car where he could maybe win a race, get some podiums,
he'll be more
I think
than
he'd
happy.
be happy enough to take some team orders, given he was off the grid 2 years ago. You know what I mean?
And driving back markers throughout his life. That's what he's done for 10 years.
Look at Perez. Perez is, he's kind of, unfortunately, it hasn't worked out, but he was very willing in 2021 to kind of be the back play for Max. He was happy to be number 2 to Max in 2021.
Exactly. He still is. The thing is, he still is. But the dynamics of Formula 1 has changed. If there were 2 teams that were in a situation that we are currently in right now, where there are 2 teams within a 10th, and then there's a half a second gap to the 3rd and 4th team, then Perez fits in perfectly. He can do the second driver role, and it's fine. The problem is there are 4 teams, and that leaves a massive gap. That's the whole thing.
4 teams where every other driver is a top tier driver.
Exactly.
I know you don't put Sainz particularly in that
It's
group,
still
but
good.
he is
He's still
much
getting
closer,
the job done.
Much closer. You know,
Yeah.
like he's very close to Leclerc. He's just not there. You know.
Yeah, but still he's doing a very, very good job. There's no
Yeah.
denying that.
So yeah,
That's
Perez
the
needs
whole
to be
thing,
dropped.
right?
I think I'm starting to think he will be dropped now. I think it's becoming more and more likely.
My worry is who they put. I have zero confidence in Daniel right now.
Me too, but I also think it's kind of like
I've
you know-
heard that Daniel is getting the seat, but
Yeah.
I don't see the point because I think there could not be an uglier exit for Daniel from Formula One than being teamed up with Max Verstappen in a Red Bull without any testing or anything,
yeah.
and in a completely alien environment and with Constructors' Championship on the line. I think he might fare better than Sergio to an extent, but the gap will be massive.
Yeah, but I mean
He'll end up
he's
getting dropped.
I think the way Daniel sees it at the minute though is if it doesn't work, if I don't get to the Red Bull team, I'm out anyway. So I think in his mind he'll take it.
Yeah.
You know, like if Daniel Ricciardo leaves or the RB team again, right? He has nowhere to go. Like the problem is the money he wants
He'll go
is a
to
problem.
Williams.
Well, the
probably,
problem is the money he wants is a problem. So he's going to have to take a huge drop.
He's not getting much, by the way.
No?
I think his contract is pretty pathetic, to be honest, for his the kind of money he used
I guess
to
because
get.
McLaren paid him out, right?
Yeah, at McLaren he was around 20-25 million. But
That's what they had to pay him, I think, to close it out early. Yeah,
and
so-
right now he's at 4 to 5 million something.
yeah.
That's a
But
massive drop.
even like for Williams, that's a high pay packet at the minute.
Yeah.
And
that's
Haas, Gene Haas has said that's just not what they're willing to pay, which is hilarious.
He's not going to Haas. Apparently, Haas has Ollie and Esteban Ocon, which not many people will be very happy
I
with.
think is unfortunate for Ollie Behrman, but anyway.
Yeah. Anyways,
I guess we finish out the podcast with Ferrari, I guess, will we?
yes, yeah, that's the last. Actually,
'Cause it ties back to Lewis Hamilton as well.
precisely, and what the fuck happened?
Yeah.
I'll give you one very small stat. In the after Monaco, Charles Leclerc was 31 points behind Max Verstappen. Very close. He's currently 105 points behind Max Verstappen. That is after a gap of 4 races.
Christ. Yeah,
He's
yeah.
been lapped twice in the last 4 races. He hasn't scored in 2 of them, and in the other 2 he has been. Yeah, I mean it's basically scraping by.
So here's the problem, right? Is that Ferrari, first of all, as I alluded to earlier, Ferrari have a problem where their car is track specifically really, really good and other tracks really, really bad, right? So over the winter break, they've basically got to pull a McLaren, right? I think Mercedes might have to do the same, but as you said, you saw some good things in the Sector 1 and Sector 3, so maybe I'm wrong about that and I'll be disproven over the rest of the season. But anyway, Ferrari have to fix their car because it's still not quite there. They have to fix their operations over the next season because clearly the Ferrari of old is still not gone. I think Fred has paved over it very, very well, but there's clearly some key issues.
Just to butt in the last 4 races, in one of them, Charles Leclerc was out on slick tires on a wet track.
Mm-hmm.
In another race, he was out on a dry track on
Wet
intermediates.
tires. Yeah. Jesus Christ.
In a gap of 4 races, and Charles Leclerc was crying after the race in Silverstone. You could see it in his eyes, and oh god.
Well, they've got that to contend with, and then they've got Lewis Hamilton coming in as well. And the thing is, Lewis never really calls his own strategy, so Lewis is going to go in there coming from Mercedes, expecting it to be like Mercedes, where if they call him in for inters, that they're sure that inters are the best thing to go on. Now, if Lewis fans are annoyed this year at Mercedes sabotaging Joe or Lewis, dear God, look, I think the problem now is that Fred has a lot to fix before Lewis comes in, like a lot. And I think we all thought that those these simple strategy mistakes had been fixed. Like, we knew the car was still a problem, but the car being a problem is always like, you can't really blame that on Fred, because that's always like a 12 to 18 month process.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, it's going in the right direction, so that's fine. But then it was like, after Monaco, we were like, their strategy's on point, they've got everything in control, they're ready to go, and then boom, all falls up. I genuinely don't know what the problem is at Ferrari now.
I know.
And Cardile just left as well.
Yeah. And Newey, and apparently Newey is the one who has asked for Enrico Cardile at Aston Martin.
Oh, so the thought is that he basically wants to bring Cardile over.
A CTO and a technical director. So
Right.
and Enrico Cardile will be the CTO.
Huh?
Newey will be the technical director. Just a bit similar to what Mercedes has had.
I wonder
with
will they try and
Allison
keep Dan?
Elliott.
I wonder will they try and keep Fallows as like an aero guy, or is he just gone?
Again,
I think it would be a good idea to keep him.
Has a history of working with Newey, right? For a decade or so.
The thing is, as well, like, I don't know what's going on at Aston, because Fallows was really, really good. Like, it wasn't like he was a bad, a bad director.
Yeah. So a friend of mine actually did the whole when they were in Silverstone. So Aston Martin brought the entire group of journalists and invited them for an entire tour of the facilities. And there is no Formula 1 team on the grid right now, which has these advanced facilities in place.
Mm-hmm.
And they are top notch. And they are
This is the
top
thing.
notch by a mile.
Yeah.
Like,
This is the thing I've been saying.
There's no
like,
competition anymore.
This is the thing I've been saying. Like, everyone's saying, like, I think everyone in Formula One is so, I think, unfortunately, so focused on like what happened in the last two races, that I'm like, these guys are building towards 2026. They have been for a long time, and I think that, like,
and the two words, by the way, from a friend of mine that actually went there, he said, "Holy fuck."
Yeah,
that's what he said.
Yeah.
His point was, look, I've been to Milton Keynes, I've been to Grove, I've been to MTC. Nothing comes close. And nothing comes close. This is next level.
You've got all these new facilities, all these new people, and the team was a midfield team a couple of years ago. So obviously there's going to be problems. They're still using Mercedes wind tunnel, then going to their like, obviously there's going to be all these issues. It'll be interesting to see whether, I don't know if Dan Fallows will stay, but it'd be interesting to see how the upgrades go at Hungary, because like, what it's looked like to me over the past while is that basically Alonso has been correlating stuff on track for them. And the question now will be, if the Hungary upgrades don't work, like, is there still an issue?
For me, the immediacy is not even, I was a bit alarmed by Aston Martin's immediate form. For me, all of that has gone out of the window, because they've got Enrico Cardile. And again, there are a few people who think he's not good because he's been responsible for Ferrari underperforming and stuff like that. That's not the case. There's also Adrian Newey, there's also Dan Fallows, and the most important thing is, dude, that facility makes a difference. And you know which team in the past has done something similar to this? Mercedes did that from 2010 to 2013. The amount of money they put in.
I think the other thing
we're going to see that.
People underestimate, like in 2022, I think it was, I said Aston will jump kind of into that top bracket for 23 and 24, which they have. Like, it hasn't been as spectacular as we wanted, but they're not in the midfield. Like, they are kind of somewhere between the midfield and the front pack at all times.
Yeah.
And I said the one major advantage, and I think Lawrence Stroll has been quite clever about here, was he decided to invest massively before the CapEx and everything came into these facilities, right? And they have built specific facilities from the ground up for a cost cap era. So that puts them in a situation where you might have like $1 million that you spend on upkeep and maintenance of your factory, for example, that they don't have to do because they've built a factory in a time where there's not unlimited costs. So that extra $1 million goes into the car that Red Bull can't, for example. And that's a huge difference, like, that it can make over a couple of seasons.
And Red Bull is running a wind tunnel that was used during the World War II or something.
Yeah.
Dude, there's going to come a time when all these teams are going to pay for it. And Aston is going to steal the march. Every journalist was spellbound, is what I've been told, that everyone looked at it and they were like, oh shit,
Mm-hmm.
what are we looking at right now? And there's a reason why Newey is going to Aston Martin. And again, he's going to Aston Martin. It's almost a done deal. It will be announced in September after the summer break, apparently due to some Red Bull contractual issues. He's seen all
He
these
has to
things
finish
and
the
he's-
RB17 between now and July or
Something
August,
like
so
that,
he can't
yeah.
leave. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's seen all these things, and he has a direct correlation with what is going on, what went on in Milton Keynes. He knows how advanced this is. Dude, they are building something big, and
Yeah.
every driver that is actually pissed off at his team, I'm talking about Charles Leclerc, he needs to start keeping an eye on Aston Martin, maybe start having a few talks with Lawrence Stroll, because that team is 2026. Keep an eye on this team. That's all
Yeah.
I'll say.
That's why I haven't been particularly hyped about Ferrari for Lewis, because I just think, like, we've seen this before with Ferrari, and
Yeah.
the last time Ferrari made a big run, everyone says, well, it'll be the same as Schumacher going, and it's like, no. If it's the same as Schumacher going, then that means that what will happen is Lewis will not do very well for, like, basically there'll be 4 years where or 5 years where the team is not great. And it'll be in the 4th and 5th year where it'll almost get there and then finally make the jump.
Yeah.
And let's not forget, Schumacher was a lot younger when he started there in 1996, So this isn't the same situation.
And he went from a championship winning car to a midfield team. Basically, that's what he did.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, just jumping back to Ferrari and, just capping the whole thing off. I think the problem with Ferrari is we all had this kind of... It's just the same fucking cycle again. Apparently, there are reports already floating that Fred Vasseur has already been summoned by the senior management to have a discussion on why there is a drop and stuff like that. Well, there's a reason why the whole shit show is actually happening. And the reason behind it is the accelerated upgrades. You cannot do these kind of things in Formula 1, man. Ferrari did the same nonsense in Imola. They talked a big game about 3 to 4 tenths that they'll gain from the upgrade. It didn't happen. Then they came to Barcelona, again the same shit show. You need to stop doing these kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is the whole team is still managed a bit too much from the boardroom, and once that happens, it's starting to become a bit clear that Fred has no power.
Yeah, and they say Lawrence Stroll is impatient, but he's given Dan Fallows and Mike Crack a good run. If he decides to swap those out now, it's like, okay, well, they had 2 years, 3 years to try it out at least. And they're not high level, like they weren't like these big kind of guys coming in. Fred Vasseur, like they need to let him run the team.
It's 1 year.
In the first year of Fred Vasseur, the first season, and up until Monaco of this year, it did seem like Fred had a good handle on it. But I do think those cracks are showing where, like, Fred initially obviously had complete control. And I did get a bit concerned when they signed Lewis Hamilton, because that to me never seemed like a Fred. As much as Fred I think Fred Vasseur loves Lewis Hamilton. I get why they hired Lewis Hamilton. He's still operating at a high level. I'm not trying to dig Lewis here, but there was no need to hire Lewis Hamilton. And it seemed to me like
rather go for Max Verstappen.
But just keep the doors open until you've got a car that can, like, focus on the car for now. You're Ferrari. You can always hire the best drivers. You're Ferrari. Like, there's a reason this happens. So just keep focusing on the car. And that to me was the board are upset that we're not winning. So let's kind of grab some attention here kind of thing.
The whole super team concept, it's just gone out of the window. They wanted Lewis. Again, they've got Lewis. But who's going to build the car?
Mm-hmm.
Cardile is gone. Loic Serra is not a name that has been... He's not spoken as highly as the others.
Yeah.
Frankly, he was not at a very high position in Mercedes as well. He was handling the aerodynamic part of it, but it's not like he was considered someone who made the entire difference.
Mm-hmm.
Newey has basically said no.
Yeah.
Even though they basically offered the world to him. So you have to keep these things in mind. And again, the reason why Newey says no is even he realized the entire thing is too political. It cannot be that.
He obviously just realized that, like, he's not going to get the say that he wants, and it's just like, what's the point? Like, this was the reason that Schumacher won so much was just because you had Rory Byrne, you had Ross Brawn, there's a ton more.
Jean Todt. Yeah.
You had all these guys. There's a ton more as well. But you had these guys that basically sat there, and then on top of that, they did the same thing that Newey does with Max Verstappen and that he did with Vettel, which is they asked the simple questions. They had the driver out on track. He comes back in. Ross Brawn's the type of guy who, like Newey, would have just said, that was really fast. What do you need to make it go faster? And
precisely.
Schumacher would have been able to tell him. And that was where the difference of Schumacher comes in, is Schumacher go, it needs to be faster here and here. And they go, cool, right, engineers go off and do it. Drivers don't lead the development, but their input is crucial. Yeah. And that, like, Schumacher gets a lot of credit for the input because his input was specific. But the engineers still do the work.
He did unlimited testing. I mean, from
different era.
Completely different era.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. I just think they're losing the focus, and it's one of these things again where Ferrari is so focused on short-term results that they're just never going to have a car again that can compete for a full season. Because
I mean, it's so stupid, because as soon as they got the win in Monaco, they got overexcited. Mm-hmm. From that point onwards, every report was they're accelerating the upgrades, they're accelerating. It's not about that. It should not be about that. But the problem is, again, whatever I've gathered is, you need someone who needs to have full authority. And I don't think Fred Vasseur has that at Ferrari. And if he does not, I think we'll continue to go back in these cycles. And good luck to Lewis and his fans, because he's, I'll give them 4 more races.
Yeah.
And just to end it, I would ideally give Ferrari and Vasseur 4 to 5 more races to see where the trajectory ends. And if they are not improving, this is a misstep. If they can recover and find things to actually, put things back in place, and they are fighting the top 3, if they can get back to that, maybe there is scope. Yeah. Right now, I don't see the point where it's going.
I just don't think it's a car. I think it's operations. And I think the problem with that is the car will be fixed over the next 12 months if they have a proper system in place. But Cardile leaving shows me that basically he's probably sick of a point where every time anything goes wrong, the team starts trying to shake things up, and he's like, we can't work this way. And I'm sure Fred at some point will say the same. And I reckon Newey has probably, because Newey did say, he's like, I'm going to wait until after the contract to make a final decision. So I would say Newey is probably leaning towards Aston, but probably hasn't pulled the final trigger yet.
Yeah.
Because I would say he's probably been watching everything from the outside and probably talked to Fred. And Fred's been like, oh, it's great here when things are going well, but they're a nightmare when things are going poorly. And he's probably decided that's not the environment I want. Whereas at Aston right now, where they're coming from, Lawrence is willing to go, yes, you're the guy, here's a blank check. You can do whatever the fuck you want. Just make my team win, and that's it. Like, just...
Sometimes you need that, right? And again, I'll keep coming back to the thing.
Lawrence puts the best people in place. Yeah.
And again, Mercedes, and everyone forgets this thing. Red Bull 2010, why Red Bull dominated in 2010, 11, 12. Red Bull was the only team that invested heavily in simulation tools. Only team that brought upgrades and they worked. Ferrari had a shit show when it comes to this. McLaren had the same issues. I think we are going to see a point. Either we are going to see in future Max moving to Aston Martin, or maybe one of the drivers, and they're going to steal the march. That's my prediction is when it comes to the next era.
I think Lawrence has just seen a simple thing which is just F1's about the engineers. Like, everyone's talking about the drivers. He's just let's get an experienced world champion in the car for now who can give us all the feedback and that we know will deliver on track when the car is good. So I don't have to worry about the driver. And then he's gone, right, here's a blank check. I want fucking all the best facilities to get all the best engineers, because once we've got a good driver, we've got the Aston Martin badge, which every fucking person loves. And then you can go out and pull as many engineers as possible. And when the engineer comes in and says, I only want to work under full autonomy, it's like, cool, yeah, great.
Yeah. Precisely. And now, just to top it all off, if you're Charles Leclerc right now, what are you thinking? This is the third cycle, by the way. 2019 to 2020, Ferrari fell. 2022 to 2023, again, Ferrari suffered. Now it's another cycle, and again he made a commitment. But again, contracts are not worth the paper they're signed on these
No,
days.
contracts are like hearts; they're made to be broken.
Precisely. So if you're Charles Leclerc, what are you thinking? Because we always forget he's represented by Nicholas Todd, probably one of the more shrewd managers in Formula One.
Yeah. I think honestly he goes through 2025 at the minute anyway and sees what happens. I'm sure he's put a break clause in there that basically says like
It's there.
there are certain performances that you need to perform in 2025. The thing is, I don't think he should leave before the end of 2026 personally. Because at the end of the day, like going to Aston could be a fucking great idea if the seat opened up there. Going to Red Bull could be an amazing idea if the seat opened up there. Going to McLaren, going to Audi, all these places could be amazing chances. But nobody knows who's going to be fastest, because even if the engineers at Mercedes are looking at their engine stuff and going, this engine is going to be by far and away the best, I'm sure the guys at Honda are probably thinking the same thing. And until those engines are on track inside a chassis that works, because Williams had the same engine as Mercedes in 2014. Williams weren't winning everything. They had a really fucking good season because of the engine advantage.
Yeah.
But the chassis makes a difference as well. So there's all these things that come together, and we can all make great guesses. But I don't know, they're not going to tell Charles every piece of data. Like, they're not going to say, here's all the printouts of all the data. Go check with Ferrari.
I don't think they even know. I don't think they even plan.
You know what I mean, though? Like, they're not going to go like, here's our exact engine figures so you can compare them with Ferrari. Because to compare them with Ferrari, he's then going to have to go and give them to Ferrari. As I knock a bottle of water over. But yeah. So I think he stays until 2026. I think the same with Lando. Yeah. Lando, it seems to be working out for. I think all of them, including Max Verstappen, have probably said, let's see what the new regulations bring.
I think the biggest winner is George Russell out of all this, by the way.
Maybe. If Mercedes can build a good chassis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least what I don't see Mercedes falling back too much from this stage.
Mm-hmm.
But there is actually a scenario where George will be able to have a bit of a lead in Mercedes and Lewis won't be there.
Yeah.
And that is, again, it's going to help in 2025 whether he gets a title challenge out of it, because Mercedes is operationally good. It's not as shite as McLaren right now, so they don't have that big a scope to improve. Who knows? But again, we are in for the next
Mercedes,
great months.
If Mercedes are at the point where they have actually figured out the car balance as a whole, and it is just layering on performance, then they are essentially in the same position as McLaren were at the start of this season.
With better operational team.
Yes. So
and only one driver.
And
we don't know who's going to be a second driver.
Exactly. It'll be Kimi, but anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, right, let's leave it there. Well, long one again.
It was supposed to be an hour, but again, Formula One, a lot of things have happened. Yeah. We went on about 20 minutes for the British bias. Anyways, our viewers love that. Anyways, thanks to everyone who watched this thing. If you're still watching, and if you've not commented, please comment. Drop a like. Again, subscribe if you're new. Ask a friend to subscribe the whole thing as well. We are at 54 right now. Let's get to 100. Help us get to 100. Then help us get to 1,000. Then help us get to 1 million. There's also,
if we've upset you at all, there is a clip button below you can use to actually clip out your own clips and share them and slander us on Twitter. So feel free to do that too.
We'd love that.
Yeah, we
like being insulted. Thanks for watching, by the way.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
Thanks for watching and take care.
Till next week. Bye.